It was supposed to be just another day in court, a routine sentencing hearing. A troubled teenager standing before the bench, head bowed low, expected to be dismissed, scolded, and locked away. But what happened next shocked an entire courtroom. Because when the judge raised his voice, when he humiliated that boy in front of everyone, the teen didn't break. He didn't beg. He didn't cry. Instead, his next words left the entire courtroom frozen in silence. And it was in that silence that the truth came crashing down. The story begins in a quiet southern town, a place where church bells ring on Sunday mornings, where neighbors smile over white picket fences, but beneath that calm surface, something darker lingers. 16-year-old Jamal Williams, a boy with tired eyes and worn-out sneakers, stood at the heart of it. He wasn't a criminal mastermind. He wasn't violent. He was just a kid, born into a system that judged him before he ever had a chance to speak. And on that humid summer morning, he walked into court, surrounded by whispers. The prosecutor painted him as a menace, a danger, someone who deserved to be taught a lesson. But outside the courthouse, the story was different. Neighbors remembered Jamal carrying groceries for the elderly. Teachers remembered him staying after class to help clean the chalkboard. And his little sister, she remembered the way he tucked her in every night, whispering, "One day, I'll make it better for us." Still, none of that mattered in the cold eyes of the law. You see, Jamal's life was marked by contradictions. He was the kid who dreamed big, but carried burdens too heavy for his young shoulders. His father had been absent, his mother working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. He wrote in a notebook, pages filled with goals, poems, and the haunting words, "Prove them wrong." But the streets whispered louder, and one mistake, just one, was all it took to brand him forever. A stolen bike, an accusation, no hard evidence, just his face, his skin, his reputation in a town where boys like him weren't given second chances. So, the judge didn't see Jamal's notebook, didn't see the little sister in the gallery, clutching her stuffed toy, praying for mercy. All he saw was another statistic. Then came the turning point. The judge, stern, sharp, his robe flowing as he leaned forward, raised his voice. "Young man, you think this is a game? You're nothing but trouble. If I had my way, you'd be locked up for years." The courtroom murmured. Heads nodded. It felt like the end. But Jamal, he lifted his chin. His voice didn't shake. And with every eye on him, he said words no one expected. "Your Honor, do you even know who I am? Do you know what I've lived through just to stand here today? You see a criminal, but you don't see me. And maybe that's the real crime." The room went silent. The judge froze. Reporters scribbled their pens midair. Even the bailiff looked away, uncomfortable. And then, Jamal reached into his folder and pulled out something that turned the trial upside down. A letter, written by his late father, a man who had once worked alongside that very same judge at a local firm. A man who had been wrongfully accused himself decades earlier. The courtroom gasped, because suddenly this wasn't just about a stolen bike. It was about history, about patterns, about cycles of injustice that stretched back further than anyone wanted to admit. The letter revealed it all. How his father had been railroaded by the same justice system. How he had begged for a second chance that never came. And how he had written, "If my son ever stands where I stood, I pray someone will finally listen." The judge's face drained of color. His booming voice shrank into silence. For the first time, the courtroom saw Jamal not as a criminal, but as a boy trapped in the echoes of his father's fate. And in that moment, power shifted. The judge, the man who thought he held all the authority, was the one left speechless. But here's the twist. Despite the letter, despite the silence, despite the undeniable truth laid bare for all to see, the gavel still fell. And Jamal's fate? It wasn't freedom. It wasn't mercy. It was something far more complicated. A ruling that left the crowd divided, his sister in tears, and the community asking, had justice truly been served, or had the cycle simply repeated itself? The story didn't end that day. If anything, it had only begun, because while the judge's voice once echoed over Jamal's, now, Jamal's words were the ones haunting the town, words that would not be forgotten. And that is where the lesson lies. Sometimes, the world will judge you before you ever speak. Sometimes they'll call you names, strip you of dignity, and expect you to break. But resilience is when you find your voice anyway. Jamal didn't just stand in a courtroom. He stood for every kid who'd been dismissed, ignored, and silenced. And in that silence he created came a truth too powerful to deny. Last time, we saw a teenager stand in court, facing humiliation from a powerful judge. But instead of breaking, Jamal Williams shocked everyone. He revealed a letter from his late father, a letter that tied his own struggle to the very same judge sitting above him. The courtroom froze. The silence was deafening. But then came the gavel. And Jamal's fate? It wasn't mercy. It wasn't freedom. It was something far more complicated. And in part 2, we uncover what really happened after that gavel fell, because Jamal's silence spoke louder than anyone could have imagined. When the judge delivered his decision, the room gasped. Jamal wasn't sentenced to years behind bars, but he wasn't set free either. Instead, he was placed on probation, strict conditions, mandatory community service, and a looming shadow over his every step. On paper, it looked like leniency, but to Jamal, it felt like a leash. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones flashed. Teen confronts judge with father's letter. Headlines spread like wildfire. And suddenly, this wasn't just about a bike. It was about the system. The letter, that was just one piece of the puzzle. Jamal's father, Marcus Williams, had been a man of principles, a hardworking paralegal, and, ironically, a believer in the law. But years earlier, he was accused of falsifying documents at that same courthouse. The case destroyed him. The judge? The same man now yelling at Jamal. Marcus never recovered. His reputation shattered. His family sank deeper into poverty. And before his death, he left behind one haunting message for his son. They may take everything from you, but never let them take your voice. That letter was Marcus speaking from the grave, and now the world was listening. The town erupted with debate. Some said Jamal was a brave young man, standing up for himself and exposing the truth. Others said he was just another troubled teen playing the victim. But the one group that mattered most? The youth. In schools, in neighborhoods, on social media, Jamal's words echoed. You see a criminal, but you don't see me. Kids who had felt invisible suddenly felt seen, and that terrified people in power. But here's where the story takes a darker turn, because behind closed doors, the judge wasn't finished, embarrassed, exposed. He wanted Jamal's silence for good. Phone calls were made, quiet meetings were held, and suddenly, Jamal found himself followed, watched, targeted for the smallest mistakes. One missed curfew, one wrong friend, anything could send him straight back to jail. It was a trap, and Jamal knew it. One night, as rain poured down on cracked sidewalks, Jamal walked home from his community service shift. Blue lights flashed. Police pulled up. Jamal Williams, you're coming with us. The charge? Violation of probation. But the reason? Something so small, it bordered on absurd. He had stopped to help a homeless man pick up spilled groceries and missed curfew by 15 minutes. 15 minutes was all it took to drag him back before the same judge. And this time, there was no letter, no prepared speech, just Jamal standing in silence, staring at a system determined to break him. But that silence, it said everything. The courtroom, once again, grew still. The people watching realized this wasn't justice. This was retaliation. The gavel struck once more. But before the judge could even speak, something unexpected happened. A voice rang out from the gallery. Not Jamal's, not his lawyer's. It was a retired attorney, someone who had worked with Marcus Williams years ago. And they shouted, "Enough! This boy deserves a fair trial." And I have proof that changes everything. The courtroom erupted. Gasps, murmurs. The judge's face tightened in fear, because suddenly, the secret he had buried decades ago was about to come to light. And here's the truth. Sometimes the fight for justice doesn't end with one voice. Sometimes it takes generations. A father, a son, and the courage of those who refuse to stay silent. Jamal stood alone once, but now his silence had become a movement. And that movement was just beginning. So now I ask you, was Jamal's second arrest fate or a setup? What secret was the retired attorney holding? And could it finally expose the judge once and for all? Because in this story, the truth has claws, and it refuses to stay buried. So, what do you think? Did Jamal win, or did the system still win in the end? Was justice really served? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want to hear what happened next, you already know.